So you just received your notice of property tax valuation in the mail and you're freaking out because it looks way too high. Let's talk about why your property value may have gone up this year, how to use that tax valuation to calculate your likely actual tax amount due, and how to appeal your tax valuation if you believe it's incorrect. Now, this is typically handled by your city or your county. However, I think there's a lot of similarities between different taxing districts, so no matter where you live, you'll probably find this video helpful. Gray is here to join us today. He's going to be helping me with the video. He's here for moral support, also sound effects. He can't stand when I'm talking to someone other than him. But like I said, I'll try to present the information in such a way that it'll be useful no matter where you live. So let's get started. So the first question I've been getting is, why is the property valuation so high? Well, for Denver County, tax valuations are actually updated once every 2 years, not every year. So if you look closely at your valuation letter, you may notice that the increase is actually a 2-year increase from 2020 to 2022. So if you take that into account and you think back to what your local market was like during that time, depending on where you live, a 30 to 40% increase may not actually seem that crazy after all. The other important thing to remember is that the valuation is going to be as of a specific date. In the case of Denver, our valuation is as of June 30th, 2022. If you remember, after June of 2022, interest rates started to go up and property values started to come down. So you may feel like your house isn't worth that much now, but maybe it was worth that much back in June 2022. Unfortunately, in Denver, June 30th, 2022 was almost exactly the absolute peak of the market before it started coming back down. So because of that date, we're getting hit with the highest possible value. But the good news is Denver is a great market, and I think property values are going to continue going up, especially once interest rates start to come down. So, it might seem high right now, but in another few years, you may look back and think, that's nothing compared to what my house is worth now. Hopefully, right? Another thing to keep in mind is that your actual tax due may not be quite as bad as you think. So rather than just looking at your valuation increase and freaking out about that, it's a good idea to actually calculate what your tax due is likely to be. Now, again, the numbers will change depending on where you live, but the formula for calculating your tax due is pretty consistent typically from place to place. And you can probably find the formula on your local municipality's website. So as an example, let's take a look at my property tax valuation and then the Denver County website and try to figure out what my actual tax due is going to be, which will then allow us to figure out how much it's gone up and how much my monthly payment is going to increase. This is the Colorado State website, and fortunately this formula tends to be fairly universal and most areas will probably use something pretty similar to this. Basically the way it works in Colorado is you take your actual value, which comes from your notice of valuation, you multiply it by the assessment rate, which in Denver County is on your notice of valuation, and then you get your assessed value. Once you have that, you multiply that by the tax rate, which will give you your taxes. Now, the tax rate is subject to change. So for example, if you live in Denver, the actual mill levy that's going to be used to calculate your 2023 taxes, which are payable in 2024, is going to be set around December 15th, 2023. It could go up or it could go down or it could stay the same. So just keep that in mind and remember that this is just an estimate. But you can see that they tell you the tax rate for 2022. So I'm just going to go ahead and use that for now. But before I do that, we're going to need to get our actual value, and then we're going to need to get our assessment rate to calculate the assessed value. All right, so let's take a look at this notice of valuation I received for the property I own in Denver County. So again, this letter might look a little different depending on where you live, but you should be able to figure it out based on this example. In the case of Denver County, you're going to look at current year value as of June 30th, 2022. That is your starting point. And then if you keep reading, you'll see that on my letter, it says the current year actual value above will be reduced by $15,000 value adjustment for residential classified property. It's good to kind of read through your letter and look for things like that because this isn't entirely uncommon. You may have an adjustment listed there, so you want to make sure you factor that in. So we're going to take that $446,500 and we're going to subtract the $15,000. Now, as we go down, you'll see they give you an estimated range here. So if I calculate my taxes and it's like way outside that range, that's probably a good indication that maybe I calculated it wrong. So that's a useful piece of information, but that's not what we're looking for. So let's keep scrolling down until we find the assessment percentage. Here it is. The assessment percentage for residential is 6.765%. Now we're going to take this current year value minus the $15,000 adjustment, which is our current year actual value, and we're going to multiply that by 0.06765, which gives us 29,190.975. So that is your actual assessed value. Notice the assessed value is much, much, much lower than the current year actual value. Okay, so now that we have our assessed value, we can multiply by the tax rate and find out what our taxes might be. Now, if you read the example, that can seem a little confusing, but all you really need to know is a mill is $1 for every $1,000 of assessed value. So you essentially just take the mills, divide this number by 1,000, and then multiply that by your assessed value. So to divide this by 1,000, we just move the decimal to the left 3 places. Now we just take 29,190.975 times 0.079525, and we get our tax amount. Now that we have our estimated tax amount, we can compare with how much we paid in taxes last year and see how much our taxes would change if the mill levy stays the same. The easiest place to find your tax amount from last year is to look at your real property tax statement, which you probably received in the mail at the beginning of the year. You probably also used it when you filed your income taxes. So I just looked in my 2022 income tax file, and sure enough, there it was. And if I look at the bottom, I can see that I paid $1,823.52 for property taxes in 2022. If you can't find your real property tax statement, another way that you can find out your previous year taxes is by contacting your local municipality. They may charge you a fee for this service, but at least you can get the information if you can't find it anywhere else. Another way you can go about it is by calling your lender. If you have a mortgage, they might be able to tell you your previous year taxes as well. So to see how much our taxes have gone up, we're going to take $2,321.41, and we're going to subtract $1,823.52 and see that our taxes went up by $497.89 for the year, which comes out to about $41.49 a month. Okay, so now you know how to calculate an estimate of your taxes based on this valuation. But what if you feel like the valuation is way off? Like maybe they made a mistake, or maybe they didn't consider something. First off, it's important to keep in mind that your valuation is going to be based on comparable sales prior to a certain date. So the county assessor is probably not going to change your valuation purely based on the fact that prices have gone down since then. If you want to try to appeal this, you're really going to be wanting to look at comparable properties that were sold prior to that date. Now, your notice of valuation may or may not include a list of comparable properties that were used to determine your value. Fortunately, in Denver County, they did include a list. If you live in Denver County, you'll probably have something similar to this. If you live in a different county, you may or may not. You may be able to contact the county or city directly to obtain the comps that were used. Hopefully you can at least get a list of addresses. Luckily in Denver, they've given us a little more information than that, so we can take a closer look. Basically, as you can see, they've given me a pretty detailed breakdown. The first row is the subject, which is my property, and then there are 5 other properties that they've used as comparables. They're all located in my same townhome complex, and one of them is actually my property because it was actually sold during the time frame they're using. If we keep looking down, you'll see that they've put a time adjustment on there, which I'm assuming is based on the date of sale. And then if you keep scrolling down even further, you'll see that there's a market adjustment on there, which could be due to the number of bedrooms or the size of the unit, whatever the case may be. The appraiser felt that it was necessary to adjust that value. So you finally get your market adjusted sale right across there, which they then average out to give you your market value. Some cities or municipalities may not give you this much information. You're just going to need to try and dig up as much as you can. And if you can get a list of addresses, then you can start to sort of pick those apart and maybe try to make an argument for why your house doesn't necessarily match with those properties, or maybe try to find additional comparables that you can throw into the mix that might help you lower that value a little bit. Your real estate broker is going to be a great resource because they have access to the MLS, and I'm sure they'll be happy to help you out. They probably won't charge you anything for it. It's just sort of an act of goodwill, and if it's helpful to you, maybe you'll refer us out to your friends and family who might want to buy or sell a home in the future. If you live in Denver, you can definitely reach out to me, and I'll be happy to kind of go through this with you and hopefully help you try to build an intelligent argument as to why you think your property valuation was too high. So now you've looked at all the comparable properties, you're going to take that well-researched and well-presented argument, and you're going to submit it in the form of an appeal. So how do you submit an appeal? Well, the first place to look is going to be on your notice of valuation. If you take a look at my notice of valuation, you can see they give you several options. You can do it by mail, you can do it in person, but I personally think the easiest way is to do it online. So I'm going to go to the Denver County website, and I'm going to go through this with you really quick so you can just kind of see how it works. Okay, so I'm just going to jump on the computer and go to www.denvergov.org/online protests because that is the link in the letter. Here's the Denver County website. I'm just going to scroll down. It's going to give me directions for online filing. First step, visit the Denver Property Taxation and Assessment System to find your property. So let's do that. And it's going to say enter an address or schedule number. You're just going to press search and then scroll down to results. Click on your address and it'll pull up information about your property. Now, the first thing to do, here's a little pro tip. Just go ahead and copy this schedule number. That's your parcel number. You're going to need that later. Then you're going to go ahead and hit Assessment Protest. Click here to file an appeal, and then you're going to log in or create a new account. Once you're logged in, you're going to go click on Real Property Appeals, begin filing. And then you're going to come over here to parcel number and you're going to paste in that number from before. But before you hit search, I found this out the hard way. You're just going to need to delete all of the dashes out of that number. Now you can hit search and your property should pop up down below. Then all you have to do is click start filing. You're going to just check whether you want the mailing address to be associated with the appeal, or if you're going to want a different mailing address, you can select no and put in something else. I'm just going to click yes. and then I'm going to put in the value that I think the property is worth, followed by an explanation. One good example of a way that you could potentially appeal your valuation is if it looks like all the comparable properties that sold around you during that time were nicely updated, whereas maybe your property is still all original, it was built in 1980 and nothing's been changed since then. So you don't think it's fair for your property that hasn't been updated since 1980 to be valued the same as a property that was completely remodeled with all new stuff. If that's the case, then you could maybe submit some photos of your property and just explain that, hey, all these other properties are brand new and remodeled. Mine is still the same as it was in 1980. So because of that, I believe that the value should be reduced by this much. And then they'll take that evidence and they'll look at it and they may actually decide, oh yeah, you're right. We didn't realize your property wasn't updated, and they might give you a lower valuation. Once you're done filling in your explanation, you're going to fill out the rest of this form and then hit next. This is where you can put in your comparable properties. If you want to, you're just going to hit find comparables. They're going to give you a list of comparable properties that fall within the time frame and location requirements that they want, and then they're going to let you select up to 3 of those. Once you're done selecting your comps, you're going to hit next, and this is where you can put in your attachments. So here's where you can add any photos or screenshots or documentation that supports your argument. Once you're done uploading your files, you go ahead and click next. Then you're just going to read this affirmation and then you can submit. You can also print a draft of your appeal so you can go through and check it and make sure everything's good before you go ahead and submit, or you can cancel your filing. And that's how you go through the appeals process on the Denver website. Again, it's going to be different depending on your municipality, your county, but the process should be relatively similar no matter where you're located. Most counties and cities will probably have a website. If they don't, you may have to do it by mail, but ultimately, all you're doing is you're just putting together a list of comparable properties and your own argument as to why you think your property is worth a certain amount based on those comparables. If your argument is convincing, they may see your side of it and decide to lower your valuation. There is a deadline for this, and the deadline for Denver County is June 8th. It may take a little time to put all your comps together, so again, I would definitely recommend reaching out to your real estate professional, someone you trust who has access to the MLS and has done this sort of thing before, to kind of help you through this process if you're at all unsure. Let me know in the comments down below, did you decide to appeal your valuation and how'd it go? If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one.